Some of you are still struggling a little bit with the Riley approach and the construction drawing, the kind of abstract thinking in the construction drawing. I've given you lots of cautions about it, and I need to keep giving them to you because this is a tough way to think, to force yourself to think. It's not something that comes naturally, and so some of you are having a tendency to kind of feel obligated to put some of the Riley lines in there, even if you don't quite understand how they are describing form. So here's another one of this model that we've been looking at. So here's an overlay, the model, and overlaying how the big simple masses might be broken down by this method. And I will say this method is not the approach. We are absolutely not dogmatic. We're just trying to find something that helps us understand the head because it's so hard and it's so complex, and trying to find a way that gives us a sense of three-dimensionality on that surface. So if some lines don't make sense to you, they don't help your form, either figure out how they might do that or leave them out. It's absolutely okay. And I am fine with, if you finish this class and you never quite exactly use these Riley lines again, I am absolutely fine with that, as long as you use something that helps you find the simple relationships of how the parts interrelate to the whole in a three-dimensional way. That's the point. Riley's not the point. The point is any method that helps you parse the complexity. You develop your own ideas about it and come up with something that works for you, run with it. Okay, so this is the idea. Some of you are kind of, well, there's this Riley line, I don't quite understand it, so I'll just put something on there, and that something kind of ends up going against the form or hurting the form. These lines I just threw on because some of my students in my current live class are struggling with this. I want them to just take them back out. So, how did your homework go for you? Were you able to bring out the three-dimensional nature of the head as you took and as you made the shadow just one dark mass, didn't worry about it, so that you can focus your attention in the light? Did that work out for you? If you really pushed this idea of three-dimensionality and full value, probably worked out for you pretty well. If you had a reasonably accurate construction, and then if you came into that construction and put everything in dark, just masked it black, gave that dark the proper edges, soft turning forms or sharp cast shadows, and then you work the form from highlight wrapping around a halftone, highlight wrapping around a halftone in the shadow. If you thought like that, it worked out beautifully for you. If you didn't, it didn't. But you're also not all that experienced. We're just part way into the class here. Don't feel bad if you struggled with it. It's completely normal. Okay. And I have often said in the class that every line that you draw and every tone that you put down must be designed to describe the underlying form. I've also said in the class that it's okay, so to speak, to tell a lie so that you can tell a greater truth, meaning it's okay to exaggerate a little to give a greater sense of form, because you're not copying the three-dimensional world. You're not literally sculpting. You don't have the luxury of three-dimensional sculpting. So you've got to sculpt on a two-dimensional page. You've got to push, enhance, even exaggerate if necessary to give the three-dimensional nature of this subject a leg up, a push forward, the X, Y, and Z axis, whatever you think. And so some of the old school illustrators put it in a way that might be helpful. They said something like this. They said, draw in such a way that you could hand your drawings to a sculptor, and with no other reference, the sculptor would be able to accurately sculpt the subject based on your drawing. And I think that is fantastic advice. So we are rendering three-dimensional form created by light and shadow. And I hope, by the way, that you made really sure, as we said in your homework, I hope that you made really sure that you used a direct spotlight rather than just kind of being by a skylight or a window light. Now, there's nothing wrong with those other kinds of light, but we're really pushing a sense of strong, clear light and shadow. So in this point in the class, we're sticking with a point light source, whether it's a spotlight or even a desk lamp that's close to your subject to give a brightness of a spot. Okay, so let's make sure we have laid our foundation properly so that we can move on from there. We have taken a close look at this idea of how we have to deal with the fact that our medium cannot reproduce everything that we can see with light. We've looked at potential solutions for that idea. For instance, last week with the work of Susan Lyon, where to get this beautiful turning of form and rendering in the face, to get all of that value range, to make that happen, something has to give, something has to be sacrificed. In this case, everything in the shadow is pushed into a narrow value range. It's not that you must always choose the light over the shadow, or vice versa. It's that you must choose to eliminate or edit something. Can't do everything. So artistically, what are you going to choose to emphasize, and what are you going to choose to edit out? This is one example, one idea that you can use appropriately on how to do that. A wider value range to do one thing, sacrificing the value range to do the other thing. So we've been using this guy a lot. I use this guy a lot in my classes. As a matter of fact, I just had a class. I'm currently teaching, coincidentally, head drawing this term. And so I'm working with my live class with the same kind of principles I'm working with all of you. And so we just had this model last week, and it was a challenge. He has so much character, so much visual interest, and it's kind of fun to try and capture that. And you are so much more likely to capture that when you go not for the complexity of his likeness, but for the simple statement of his likeness.